So there we go. We are live. Hello, my name is Nicole Lyons. I am from the Jorgensen Learning Center, and I am here with my colleagues, Dr. Ray Jorgensen, Colleen Sullivan, Vince Starks, and Joe Marshall. Full house today. We're excited to be here with you. And as you heard, we're part of the Jorgensen Learning Center. We are a team of leadership communications coaches, and we are committed to supporting leaders to enhance the quality of their everyday leadership conversations, relationships, and results. We are using the Zoom webinar platform today. Some of you may be familiar with that, but if you're not, there are a lot of options there down at the bottom of your screen that can help you to engage with us today, which we love. Please feel free to use the chat feature to connect with us as well as your fellow attendees. You can chat with us in two different ways. One, you can send messages just to us as the attendees, or you can choose, there's a little drop-down menu that you can send your thoughts, ideas, comments, questions to everyone within the group, which we recommend. Also, there's a Q&A feature down at the bottom there where you can ask us questions that we will answer for you live, or you can just raise your hand to be included in the conversation. So we look forward to, during this conversation today, engaging with you through those features here on the Zoom webinar platform. As we get started today, I wanted to start us off with a quote. I read this recently and I thought it captured the essence of the work that we do here at the Jorgensen Learning Center so well, and the reason why we're here today. The quote is from an author, a researcher, and a scholar named Judith Glasser, one of Ray's favorite teachers, and it says, "To get to the next level of greatness depends on the quality of the culture, which depends on the quality of the relationships, which depends on the quality of the conversations. Everything happens through conversation." With that, I'll turn it over to Colleen to get us started.
And I think that's a beautiful setup as to really why we're here today. I mean, we're here today as many organizations pivot to some strategic offsites, some strategic planning for the year. Many of you, hopefully you were with us last month, where our focus has been on meeting makeovers. So many of these conversations are happening in meetings that happen every single day. So our focus today it's what's on your agenda. How can we really ensure that we're being very intentional with not only every conversation we hold? From our perspective, that's one-on-one, that's one-on-many, that is a regularly scheduled meeting that you're holding, or it could be in the virtual environment. So how can we really ensure we are producing the desired results? So with that, my hope is at the end of our conversation today, you brought some questions, you brought some very specific things. So my hope is that my panel of friends here can provide you with some suggestions and some ideas that you can walk away and implement immediately in the next meeting that you hold to really enhance the engagement and to ensure you're producing the desired result. So I'm going to pause. Nicole, did you want to add anything to that before we close the loop?
So I've been thinking a lot lately about meaning. We're all in this environment right now where things are uncertain. There's a lot happening out there in the world. And sometimes the things we do day to day can feel very trivial. And we can start to wonder, why am I even doing this? The world is falling apart. And so I think the opportunities, the conversations, all of the kinds of conversations you mentioned, Colleen, are opportunities to help people create meaning and connection to the work that they're doing, to the organization, to each other, which is so essential and important right now. So I think we'll get to some of that space today where we can talk about how to really do that within those conversations that you're having every day.
Excellent. Thank you, ladies, for the setup. That was really good. And welcome, everybody. Vince, you and Joe, please close the loop. Now, those that are listening, close the loop means they're reacting to what they heard Colleen and Nicole say we were going to work on today. It is a way of immediately getting engagement in a room, virtually or face-to-face, doesn't matter. You can do it right away in paired conversations. If it's a bigger group, or like right now, it's just us. So we'll find out pretty quickly what they heard and what resonated with them. So Vince, why don't you start us off? What did you hear from Colleen and Nicole?
Sure. So what I heard, Nicole started us off by sharing a very, very powerful quote that talked about the importance of conversational engagement as a way to get to the end result. And Colleen really brought us in and talked about transitions that we're going through, how some of us have been working virtually, some of us are going back into the office space, some of us are getting ready to set things up for our organizations. And so the importance of good quality conversations really help align the people and the organization towards desired outcomes. And so, I mean, great. I'm excited, man. That's what I heard her say. Joe, did you hear anything differently? Did you hear something more? I'll pass it to my colleague.
I don't think I heard anything any differently, Vince. And I think we've pretty well captured what's there. I never cease to be amazed at the steepness of the curve, though, when we talk about managing meetings, because it's not unlike exercising regularly or healthy eating. Nobody's coming to enforce rules. Nobody's coming to say, hey, your conversations and your relationships can be stronger and can be better if you do these things. So in the spirit of, this is a discipline, this is a journey. Again, big changes don't happen in big steps. They happen in small steps that are incrementally built. And so I think hopefully that's what our listeners get out of the conversation today, is the idea that they can make it better through the small things that they do themselves actively.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Colleen, Nicole, please, part of closing the loop is you respond to what you heard after you ask, what did you hear me say and what did it mean to you, which is what they just gave you. So Colleen, anything additional to say as we move forward?
No, well, I'd say no, and then I'll add something. So there you go. So I guess I really mean yes. Just something when my buddy Joe was commenting, I encourage people to pick one thing, right? I mean, it is a Tao and a practice. And so, we're going to be sharing, and if you've been watching our other podcasts, I encourage you to watch or listen to those, because we're modeling some of these theories, methods, and tools that you're already noticing. So my invitation to Joe's point is, as we're going through this webinar today, listen to one or two things and just embrace those and embed those. Because as he mentioned, it's, sometimes it's those little small incremental steps that make a huge impact.
That's beautiful. Nicole, anything to add to what you heard from your partner as you listen to Vince and Joe close the loop?
Yeah, I think everything that everyone has added just really deepens the importance of how essential it is to be intentional about the kind of conversations that you hold. And what Joe said is so important. It is an incremental practice. It is about implementing and trying one new thing, as Colleen said, to improve or enhance the quality of those conversations, and it will continue to build on itself. So I think that I'm excited to get to that place today where we can share that with others.
Well, that's really excellent. And I want you that are listening, and my team already knows this, they just did two things. Colleen and Nicole focused this conversation today. They used language, words to focus us. And then they engaged Vince and Joe in a conversation with them about, what did you hear? What did that mean to you? So meaning began to unfold. And of course, Colleen at first said, no, I have nothing to add, but oh, yes, I do. Because there was something that happened in the words that Joe and Vince used that prompted her to say one more thing, to make sure that we are in the same place. So right there, when we first started, two things occurred. Colleen and Nicole focused us. They then engaged Joe and Vince by closing the loop. And then they confirmed that they actually heard the expectation for this conversation today. I think that was a perfect example of two of the fundamental pieces when we do this work: focus and engage the group. So if you're looking at your agendas right now, I'd like you to pick one of the things that you think was the most important. And I'm going to give you a little slight caveat. When I was functioning formally as a leader in different organizations, I would start a meeting and I would try and get rid of the stuff from the last meeting that was trite or small, little things we needed to finish with. And I said, I'll just do those quickly so we can get to the big stuff. Well, I never got to the big stuff. I ended up having a longer conversation about this stuff that really didn't have an impact and was really not about building a common understanding about the priorities that I cared about. A lot in that language there. So those of you that are looking at your agendas, and I do hope you brought them, pay attention to the last agenda and identify which of the items were your absolute top priorities. Our invitation to you after you focus and engage is to make sure you stay on those priorities. I worry that people hurry through an agenda to make sure they hit all the topics, and they sometimes don't give enough time to what you have determined through your planning and preparation that these are the most important items we need to discuss. So I'm just going to go back to my gang. Gang, what are you hearing me say? And I know you have examples of this yourselves. What are you hearing me say? And can you kind of provoke our listeners with an example or two of when that has happened, either to you or you've seen it happen to one of the people you're coaching? Who'd like to go first?
Yeah, so I'll start. I think, Ray, one of the things that you talk about here, by inference, if you will, at this point, is meeting planning. And the fact that your meeting has to be well thought out. And I find in people that I talk to that one of the things they really struggle with, again, we advocate for, the context, purpose, and outcome for the things that you were working on in your agenda, is they really struggle with the outcome because they feel that the purpose of having the discussion is to try to outline the outcomes and figure out what to do. And so I think recognizing for the leader, recognizing and saying very deliberately that, all right, we're going to have a discussion today. It's going to focus on readiness training, or it's going to focus on clinical procedures or a change in administrative, and that when we're done, we're all going to be aligned on what those new procedures are, and we're all going to go out and execute them. And if the example is too simple for many, forgive me for that. But I think it's important that you recognize that the purpose of the meeting is alignment, is engagement, is interaction, and that you hold the group accountable to getting to that end state.
Yeah, it's a shared responsibility. And I love the way you set that up. Those of you that are listening, if you look at your agenda item, if you can go back to when you planned that meeting, for each agenda item, to Joe's point, you begin with, what do I want each of the people to know and be able to do at the end of this agenda item? And then in order for them to do this, what do they need to understand? And Joe did this very beautifully and very subtly. There needs to be a common understanding, because if we don't have common understanding, we cannot get alignment. So it's like, what do we expect each person to know and be able to do? In order for that to happen, what do they need to understand? And then why the hell are we talking about this at all? That's your C, your context statement. If we don't lay that out, we end up in a very, very strange spot. Nicole, I see you moving around there. What are you thinking right now?
I'm just flashing back to all the agendas I've seen that really are just like item 1, item 2, item 3, item 4, item 5. And there's not any space there's no alignment, A, between any of the items on that agenda, and B, there's no space to reflect or create common understanding within that time frame. It's a tick list. And that happens to us as leaders because we have so much information that we need to put forward. So many things that we're told we need to tell our teams or share with our teams, and it becomes a habit. The way that we lead our meetings, the way that we connect with our people, and it becomes comfortable to just come in and say, okay, here's what we need to talk about today. This change, that change, we're implementing this, we're out of these supplies, whatever that looks like. And at the end, you say, is there any questions? And you have people looking at you like,
no.
I have no idea what you just said.
Really?
Yeah, it's almost like I'm done, right? Okay, thank you for that lovely list. And
get me out of this room.
A stronger one sometimes has the title of the item in a bullet, right? Then it says, how long is it going to take and who's going to do it? That's better, but we still are missing what Vince said right up front. You'll never get alignment if you do that. You'll get people who will, and because I think people generally are good. I really do. And unless we have the occasional psychopath, they're mostly pretty good people. So they'll try and leave the meeting and do what is expected of them as an individual on a team. Well, the first time Colleen and Nicole laid that on the table, they were allowing Vince and Joe to develop personal meaning about what was said. Then Joe and Vince, built on one another's words, and they started to create shared meaning about the focus of this conversation. And finally, when Colleen and Nicole jumped back in again, they confirmed that what Joe and Vince said was exactly what we're going to focus on today. So notice, ladies and gentlemen that are listening, this is a big deal, because if we don't take the time to make sure that right at the beginning of the agenda item, that the focus is clear and commonly understood. So we go from individual meaning, shared meaning, to common understanding. And to Vince's point, when he made his opening comments, that's where alignment lives. If there is no common understanding, we have no alignment. Colleen, I saw you nodding. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think it just reminds me of dissemination of information is the capacity for effective action, but it doesn't guarantee it.
Beautiful.
If as a meeting leader, I'm sitting here going, I have to get through all these items, and I call it the verbal vomit. Now I'm just passing information. And then at the end, I checked, I have ticked off everything on my agenda. And so then I pause at the end and say, hey, are there any questions? Let's do a quick round the table for last minute, questions and things to share. So the outcome of that meeting for the meeting leader is getting through the agenda. It's disseminating information. My invitation is, to Joe's point, when you're planning your meeting, less is more. Are you thinking about what do you want them to know and do? Because the other big piece that our clients come to us is nobody's getting anything done. They're kicking the can down the road. Well, guess what? If you don't pause, to your point, Ray, and say, what are the committed actions? And not me telling you, but people coming up and stating them on their own. So I think that dissemination of information is the capacity for effective action. It doesn't guarantee it, is a great thing to remember in these meetings and when you're doing your planning.
I love that, Colleen, and your sensibility about effective action is really important. Those of you that are listening to hear, I don't think somebody goes out there and says, I'm going to screw up the organization or screw up my team. They're going to go out and do what they think they heard. They have personal meaning. If these disciplines are not practiced a little bit, right, they will walk out the door and do what they think is the, quote, right thing to do from their vantage point. And unless you take another, and it's not long, we're not even talking about a lot of time. This is 2 minutes, maybe 90 seconds, 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, to just ensure that we do have a common understanding beyond personal meaning, common understanding about what we're doing moving forward. That was excellent. Thank you both. Vince, what are you thinking and learning right this second, or what would you like to share?
Yeah, so just what everybody else has said, Ray, the literature is pretty clear. Adults as learners, we can't handle more than 5 to 7 items at a time, right? And so you're right. My colleagues talked about these tick lists of information. And as a leader, sometimes you have to slow the conversation down a little bit for your team. So I would never put more than 5 to 7 items on the agenda to begin with. If you have more than that, that's a problem. And then you do have to give your people space, because if you want that engagement, which you do really up front, you want people focused in what you want to talk about, then you have to give them some space and some time to express and to talk, just as we're doing right now.
Yeah.
And so the ability of the lead just to be calm, measured, and slow the conversation really will provide quality and bring the overall desired end state.
Even when you're really excited. So, I had a whole lifetime as a high school basketball coach, and some of those games were close. Well, that would make me anxious, right? So here they come to the sideline for a timeout. If I'm going, they didn't hear anything I said, right? It was like, I'm exceedingly excited. How do I slow myself down so I have a measured pace? I listen to the players. and I make a decision about what to do in the next 4 or 5 minutes that we're going to play on the floor. This is really a very, very important piece. So we focus people, we do our best to engage them. And like I just did with Vince, and Vince, did I get you right on that one, by the way?
You did.
So I acknowledge what he said, confirming that I heard him correctly. And then after I respond respectfully, because I think I did, expand slightly to make sure we stay on course. Every agenda item has a focus. Our responsibility is to stay on course. Joe, something to add, please.
Yeah, so I would just, again, as we talked about this as the meeting planning phase, I think it just might be helpful to mention to our audience, what does failure look like? So failure looks like everybody showing, people showing up to your meeting going, what are we going to talk about today? Failure looks like the executive who runs the meeting, in the 2 minutes before the meeting starts, sitting down to write up a list of things he wants to talk about. Okay, that's important to him, and I have no doubt it's pertinent to the organization, but nobody else knows about it. It's a surprise, and the group you're walking into is unfocused and not listening. And I think that's really an important thing for executives to understand, that many times their miscommunication is tied into the fact that they don't get people's attention in the meeting in a sufficient way.
So Joe has clarified another huge piece in this work. Once we focus the gang and we engage them, we are looking to determine, are they with me? Is this team with me? And those of you that have led any meeting or coached any group of kids or been a mom and dad, you can tell whether or not those folks are with you in the conversation. This is part of Leadership with Itness, which we have a little section on later. It is all about my presence that Vince identified. And Joe, what's the feedback to me? Are they with me? Are they not with me? That is powerful. I notice some questions are coming in. Nicole, do you have one for us?
We had just a really great comment here. Too many want to report out and not have engagement to develop a shared understanding and alignment. And I think that just speaks to what we were talking about before, in that so many leaders feel this pressure to just disseminate information, or they really believe that that's the purpose, or it has been the traditional purpose of their team meetings, to just disseminate information. And I think this is where all the memes that you see about this meeting should have been an email conversations really come from. It's when you're using the time that you are together face-to-face or virtually face-to-face to just dump information that maybe you've even already sent out in emails. That used to happen a lot in my old work environment, where we would get emails throughout the week, and then the team meeting was about talking about those emails. Well, did we really need to spend the time going over what you already sent me in an email, unless there was need for conversation to get the common understanding? But that wasn't what occurred. It was just a repeat of what the email already said. So I think we get in these traps as leaders, stuck doing what we've always done, or stuck feeling like I have to get through all of these items, so I don't have time for people to be having conversation during the meeting, right? That I think that people get afraid of that. They get afraid to turn the meeting, lose control of the meeting and turn it over to somebody else to talk and say something during the conversation. There's a lot of barriers to implementing the kind of things that we're all talking about here today. So I'm wondering if we can maybe give some, our people on the line, if they have their agenda in front of them and they're like, okay, you just said a lot of stuff for me to do, things to think about before the meeting. You talked about creating some focus with a CPO statement. You talked about creating common understanding. All right, I got this list of things. What am I going to do with it? So I think that I would love for us to have some conversation about, all right, we see the need for this. Now, what do I do with this agenda? Or I'm leading a meeting in like 2 weeks, and I want to have this kind of engagement that you're talking about. What do I do?
Yeah, we get into a very strange spot from time to time about people that are trying to understand, where is my leader going? What is my leader attempting to do? So Colleen, I'm going to let you play with this for a minute. here's something I would like to confirm that I understood. People are looking at their agenda. They heard a lot of stuff. What's one thing you would say to whoever it is that's looking at their agenda and listening to us? Here's something I recommend you could do immediately. What is an immediate response to the language we heard so far? That was magnificent, Nicole. Thank you. Colleen.
Immediately. Well, studies indicate if you do not get people's voices in the room, in the meeting, whether it's virtual or in person, within the first 2 minutes, people check out. So if your intention and outcome you're looking to achieve in any conversational setting is engagement, the one thing you can do is do your focusing statement, just like Nicole and I modeled, and then pause and have people close the loop. And it can be in pairs, and it can be just in this setting where people are saying it in their own words, and we already modeled it with the smaller group. But how many times have I seen leaders, they don't. They power through. And to Nicole's point, which just made me giggle, sorry, I thought I was muted, but it's like, oh, I've just got to say all this stuff. And if I open it up, people might ask me a question. So the other thing that I want you to think about is some of this theory and thinking behind it is conversation is the natural way we learn. It's not the only way. So my invitation is to be vulnerable, to create the space for people to have conversation, because it's through those conversations and it comes engagement, develops safe space, develops trust within the team. And to Vince's point, it comes alignment in where people can truly execute and produce the desired results. And it sounds so simple, and yet it is.
So one little piece there that I want my colleagues, and certainly those of you that are listening online, there are people in your meetings that are always argumentative. They disagree. And I think we have to really watch our pace and presence, to Vince's point. That person is not necessarily in opposition to what you are proposing. It is, believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, it's how they learn. This was an incredible learning experience for me when I first was a teacher, because I would have kids disagreeing with the Pythagorean theorem. I said, well, who the hell are you to fight with Joe Pythagoras? You know, this is the Pythagorean theorem. And they would disagree with it. And I did not understand that that was a way for them to learn, because they were connecting the new ideas to what was inside of them. Colleen, that was really powerful. And Nicole, great response to that. I saw you wiggle. Did we get another question?
Just a clarification. Someone asked, we used our own jargon, which we often try not to do. We said CPO statement, and that is context, purpose, and outcome. And that's really where we were in the first part of our conversation, where we were talking about establishing, okay, why are we here? The purpose is, what is it that we need you to know, right? And how, what do you need to know? And then what do we need you to do differently as a result of the information that you heard? Right. So it's developing that CPO, a statement. Doesn't have to be long, can be very quick, but just provides people with that little bit of context, the purpose of why we're talking about this in the first place, and then what do they need to know and do differently as a result.
Yeah, let me hold you right there for a second. So Vince, you and I need to have a conversation on how you rent cars, because the methodology you're currently using is not consistent with where we are, where the protocol is as established by DOD. So if I'm going to really have that conversation with Vince, right, I'm going to start with outcome. What do I want Vince to know and be able to do? Well, I'd like Vince to know what the protocol is to rent a car appropriately, so he's not going to spend his own money, or God forbid, my money in trying to rent a car. Well, how am I going to make sure that that happens? P, purpose. What does Vince need to understand so that he actually can rent the car correctly, right? So that we're not expending funds that we shouldn't be. And then C, context. Why are we talking about this? Because Vince is going crazy renting cars everywhere, and he's doing it incorrectly. And I'm going to get yelled at, he's going to get yelled at, and we're going to lose money, blah. See, there's a lot of whys that are there. But notice, ladies and gentlemen, that are listening, start with the outcome. What do I want Vince to know and be able to do? Purpose. In order for him to know and be able to do that, what does he need to understand with me? What is the common understanding he and I need to create? And then why are we talking about it? pretty straightforward. We want to make sure that we are not expending funds we don't have or putting him behind the 8 ball later on. Since I picked on you, Vince, how did that CPO example land on you?
It was spot on because I do like the expensive cars, and I apologize for renting that Ferrari. No, I thought it was spot on, and it was a great clarification. You know, you start out with, hey, why are we here, what we want to do, the purpose and the context. I thought it was a great example and realistic. Thank you for that.
Well, the confirmation of the example is magnificent. And ladies and gentlemen that are listening, and my colleagues and me, when I'm planning my next piece, I start with the outcome. I do it backwards. Now, I have been ingrained in a process called understanding by design. It's been part of me for a long, long time. And so I modify that slightly for us. It's common understanding by design. Common understanding by design, because common understanding produces aligned action. So that was excellent from both of you. Thank you. Thank you. Of course, we're running out of time, so I'm going to go to my colleagues and ask them for some support. Any other comment or clarification from the gang listening, Nicole?
I just wanted to add, Colleen shared a lot of really great things with us before we went back to CPO. And I want to just kind of close the loop on some of the things that she said.
Please
and
do.
Ray just outlined something that you can do for your overall agenda. You can do it for every individual agenda item. And being in the practice of that intentionality for why things end up on your agenda is going to be really huge to retransforming that agenda. And then Colleen mentioned after you deliver that CPO, getting people's attention, getting people's voices in the room within the first couple of minutes is also really essential to having engagement throughout your entire meeting. And as you get started putting in a practice like delivering a CPO and then closing the loop on that CPO with a question or asking people to talk to each other about what they just heard or how they're feeling about it or what they're thinking or learning or any of those type of questions, you'll want to do something we call ask and advertise. You want to say, hey, we're going to try something new at our next meeting. It might feel a little clunky and a little awkward, but I'd love your help in creating just a different kind of conversation during the meetings that we have regularly together. And really ask for that support and help to implement this in a new way. And I think your team is going to be really receptive to trying something new because it will feel different at first. And it will feel awkward and it will feel clunky to ask people, what did you hear me say? And how's it making you feel? I mean, those type of things can feel off-putting. They can feel awkward if we're not used to having conversations in that way. But it will get easier the more that you practice. So, and what other thoughts, tips do you have if someone's just getting started delivering that CPO and then asking for that check-in question or that close the loop question?
Yeah, that's beautiful. So there's lots of ways to create intention. And what we did was showed how to use a CPO. But the intention is actually the focus of the meeting. And getting people engaged is critical. And simply by closing the loop, you get them engaged. The literature on this is interesting. I don't know how many of you out there that are listening are introverts, but I am one. And if you never talk to me during a meeting, I'm just fine. Nothing would bother me in the least. In fact, the literature in education is fascinating. That introverted kids can sit in a classroom, in a learning environment for up to 30 hours and say nothing. Well, that's okay, except that conversation is the natural way we learn. So all too often, those of us that are happy in our introversion are not engaging in the conversation, therefore not developing common understanding. There will be no aligned action. That was magnificent. Thank you. Thank you. Joe, back to you. What's something you'd tell the gang?
Yeah, so I think there are probably some who are struggling just with the practicalities and the how-to. So I would offer a couple of thoughts. So the context, purpose, and outcome is, in my view, and again, these are pretty specific things, but people might be able to react to this. The context, purpose, and outcome are best when they are included in the invite for the meeting. And so, and again, in order to be able to do that, you have to think about the meeting ahead of time, and you must obviously state those things, the context, purpose, and outcome. If you struggle with coming up with the context, purpose, and the outcome, then that's a red flag that you should not be having a meeting. Because as I call it, that's a Lamborghini meeting where you're going to have a very expensive meeting where people are going to sit around and talk, but there will be no real context, purpose, or outcomes. And everybody's going to be happy about that because it was just a conversation and, was another hour toward the end of their day. So I think setting up the meeting ahead of time with the context, purpose, outcome. Then we touched a little bit on the need to check in. And I think, Ray, you were talking about how the check-in just needs to get the voices in the room so that people participate. And again, that can be a very direct question about current situation, a current situation. So the federal government is about to approve the COVID vaccine. And they are going to expect all of their employees to get vaccinated. So our organization does a lot of work with the government. What do we think? What does that mean for us and our work with the government? What are the biggest challenges we're going to have? Let's go around the group right now and name off what those big challenges are. Maybe that's an example of using a check-in to get the voices in the room. And again, it doesn't have to be your main agenda item. You're just asking, individuals, okay, Vince, what do you think is the number one thing about this new mandate that's coming out from the government for us that we need to be concerned about? And then having achieved that focus into the room so people aren't thinking about the traffic or the fight they had with their spouse last night, that instead they're focused on the things that you want to talk about, then it empowers you to work down your agenda and to close the loop with people in the course of that conversation, to let them respond with what did they hear you say and what are they thinking and what are the issues and concerns.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Okay.
Did you have another piece to add, Joe?
Just the final, piece of determining action items and checking out with the groups.
Yeah. For every agenda item, then I love the way Joe started that off. If you can't figure out a CPO, I'm not so sure you have that particular item. And if you can't get a CPO for all the things you want to talk about, I would go have a cup of coffee. I would not hold the meeting. I would do something else instead of that, because we're going to end up in a very strange place running forward. Joe, that was absolutely wonderful. Thank you. Vince, talk to us a bit. I think about, what's a bluff again? What's that stand for? Some kind of thing.
Bottom line up front.
Yeah, it's a bottom line up front. So sometimes bottom line up front is a way of checking in. If you're in the military, it's like, here's something we're worried about. Like Joe didn't talk about, look, what's going to happen to the poor Bitcoin people now that Congress has rejected their request to not have to report to the IRS. I don't think anybody's going to talk about that, right? But we could get people checked in on that. They could say, I don't know, or I do know. But I love the way this idea of a bluff, bottom line up front, as well as what's something related to our current practice. We use that as a check-in model. I thought that was really good. Some advice from you, Vince. What would you tell the listeners?
So I think that, again, for me, I think it's all really about slowing the pace of things down, because this is a new process for many people. And like you said, Nicole, people are not going to just naturally do this up front. It's going to feel clunky. It's going to feel a little awkward. And so you have to give this some time. And if you as the leader are calm and clear on what you want, and you communicate that up front, and you give the space and the time for your people to talk about things, you're going to find that your overall outcomes for your organization, it is going to pick up pace, and you're going to meet each and every one of those deliverables. So you just have to trust the process and give it a shot. And like Joe, I just reserve my real thought is in the closeout section, and we're not quite there yet, Ray. So I want to give you some time back so we can get to that part, because I think the way that we close this and tie that together is very, very important.
Yeah. The closeout, I think, will allow us to do that for everyone, and you can watch how we do it, and then I'll do a quick recap of what we've done. So Nicole, over to you, and Colleen, any final thoughts before we go to closing?
I just wanted to share a visual with all of our attendees and those watching this later. Most of what we talked about today falls into this visual realm of what you do before the meeting, what you do during the meeting, and what you do after the meeting. And we talked a lot today about creating focus. We talked a little about the surfacing and clearing obstacles, certainly talked about developing that common understanding. And then what Vince was alluding to is that generating of committed actions, which is absolutely key to not talking about the same thing over and over again in your meetings. This is the way that you can really be consistent and move the organization or your team forward. So Ray, I'll let you kind of close it out on thoughts on that conversation, and then we'll close out our session.
That was really good, Nicole. And again, you're going to have somebody in your meeting that tells the same story over and over again, keeps making the same point over and over again every time you get together. That person needs some individual coaching. And it's not that they're doing anything incorrect. Remember, people are trying to connect with the words the leader and others are using to make meaning out of this. So this is really a big deal. Constantly, almost like, I love the way I think Vince articulated that: pay attention, go slow to go fast, and notice what people are saying to you moving forward. Colleen, final thoughts before I'll do a checkout with you guys in just a moment. Final thoughts on what we were just working on or the picture.
Sure. Yeah. Just going back to generating committed actions. One of the things that we do as leadership communication coaches is we observe meetings. So I was observing a meeting in person, and it was so fascinating. I was observing the person I was coaching, and they were a participant in the meeting. And at the end of the meeting, everybody got up to leave. And he goes, wait a minute, what did we just agree to? Crickets. Nobody knew. So, they all were done with their meeting because they got through the agenda items. So I think the biggest kind of boot stop here as far as generating committed actions is do not pivot from the agenda item until you pause and say, what are the committed actions here, from whom, and by when, and write it down. Because too many times we just move to the next agenda item because we're looking at the clock and we want to get her done. So my invitation is, once again, do not pivot until you hit that committed action piece.
Yeah, don't end your topic or your particular item with, are there any questions, or we're so we are all leadership communications coaches. That's what we do, right? That's our work. And those of you that are online with us right now, give us a ring if you want. We do something called the discovery conversation. If you said, I really enjoyed listening to Vince or Nicole or Joe or Colleen, give us a ring. We'll hook you up, and you guys can have a half-hour to 45-minute conversation about your own stuff and what you're doing. And if you wanted to improve the quality of your meeting, we'll be happy to help you with that. But this work is just a set of disciplines for you to practice. We are learners. We help each other all the time. And this is just another example. So I'll do a quick checkout. What is something today that surprised you? Something you hadn't thought about in a while. And sometimes for me, it's like, I forget. I'm getting very old, so I forget. And so I might have forgotten something. I said, God, that was good. I need to remember that in my coaching practice. What's one thing that resonated with you that either came back to the forefront or even possibly was new for you today? Colleen, want to start us off?
Sure, absolutely. I think it's one of the things that Vince shared, just that adults hold in their active working memory 5 to 7 pieces of information. As much as we want to give it to them, let's remember that. So we will pause to ensure that they give an opportunity to process the information. We're not just disseminating it. And I'm out.
And that's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Joe, what's something that resonated with you?
Yeah, I just reflect on the difficulty that people have in integrating this information and using it practically in their work. I think it's a little bit like trying to convince somebody to take a bite out of a Hershey's chocolate bar. They're like, well, I don't know, it's dark. I don't know, I got nuts in it. I might break a tooth. Yeah, but you also might really enjoy it and find that it works really well for you. And indeed, you'll find that your team is more excited about what they do and their engagement.
Are you out, brother?
And I'm out.
Brother Vince, what's something that kind of tickled you this time?
Yeah, so what really is resonating with me right now, when we talked about developing a common understanding, I thought to myself, what does that mean for me? And I think as a leader, that means suspending certainty and understanding yourself. And so when you hear other voices in the room, you have to allow those voices to share, even if some of those voices have a different opinion than what you have in your mind that you want to achieve. And so as a leader, listen respectfully, listen and respond respectfully to develop a common understanding is a takeaway that I was thinking about as I listened to you guys talk. And with
That's
that,
beautiful.
I'm out.
That is beautiful. Thank you so much. Nicole, my sister from another mister, what resonated most with you today?
Yeah, I think the interconnectivity of everything that we're talking about today. And Ray, you mentioned early on the meeting about leadership withedness, which is the idea of really focusing in on how we show up, our presence and our awareness in our conversations, and how just essential that is as you start implementing these practices. And Vince, you reminded me of it, and just talking about the suspension of our own certainties. If we come in knowing exactly how this meeting is going to go and exactly what I'm going to say and exactly what everyone else is going to say, we don't have an opportunity to learn and grow. So that's just what really is standing out to me today. And I'm out.
That's great. So ladies and gentlemen that were listening, and to my colleagues and friends, thank you so much for the practical wisdom that you shared with us. I think that's the part. And I love the slowing down that you guys keep talking about. You can't do everything all at once. It's like, you can't have everything. Where would you put it? I have nowhere to put it. So I can't do everything all at once either. It's just impossible. So as we go forward, just remember a couple of things from my vantage point. One, focus your agenda item. For each agenda item, engage people. You can do it through paired conversation or asking them directly if it's one-on-one or one-on-three. Focus, engage, acknowledge people, and respond respectfully. Maintain and sustain safe space, critical. And notice how today, the more we acknowledged each other, the safer the space got. And we are already pretty easy to talk with one another, but it just got better as we went forward. Every iteration of a meeting increases the quality of safe space. And the last thing is time conversations, time your conversations. Sometimes just talk among yourselves. No, talk with a partner for 2 minutes, talk with somebody for 3 minutes. So focus, engage, acknowledge, safe space, time your conversations. That will give you quite a little feast if you do that. So it's been great chatting with you guys today. Thank you for joining us at JLC Media. We are going to get together again offline and debrief on our other channel. And we want to hear from you. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you got something out of it. We look forward to seeing you again. Take care.